Hi there, so sorry I'm late. I said I'd be here at 4, but I had to get dinner in the oven. Anyway, welcome. My name is Nissa. I am the owner of Magic of Paws, helping you help your pets, and this is my first YouTube Live. So, introduce yourself, say hello in the comments. I'll be happy to answer any questions you all have throughout this whole process. I'll be stopping between each of my points just to check and see if any questions have come in, so feel free to ask. I'm happy to answer whatever you have. But basically, the purpose of today is to go over the alternative approach to dog training. So most of you, if you've owned a dog and have taken a group training class with them, you are very used to learning a command, practicing that command, and then demonstrating that you know that command in that class. And that's pretty much the end of it. And there's one thing when I used to teach classes like that, is I was constantly hearing from people like, I don't understand why you're bothering to teach us this. When am I ever going to use this? Or my dog's really great at this when we're in class, but if we're anywhere else, it all seems to fall out of their heads. And that's the one downside to traditional dog training classes, is that there's not a lot of real world, real life applications. And that's one thing that I've always sought to add into my group training classes, whether they be in person in the past or currently offering them online and virtually, giving you some great real world applications so that you know that what you're learning actually does serve a purpose. And we're going to go through some of those today, just going over really basic, what you can look for, how you can use different commands in different situations, and just to get you start to think about all the different options that you have when you really start to think about it. So the first one that I want to go over is taking your dog with you when you go to run errands. So most of the time, when we go to run our errands, we leave our dogs at home. So that means that they're spending time alone, they're away from us, they're bored. We might be a little bit more efficient, but we're missing out on a lot of really good quality time to work with our dogs on some things that they don't normally get to work on. So by taking your dogs with you on the errands that you can, you're increasing their exposure to things that they're not used to, which is going to decrease their anxiety overall or prevent anxiety if you're working with a puppy, which as a dog trainer who specializes in dogs with anxiety, you will save yourself so many heartaches if you just get your dog used to going as many places as possible. You'd be surprised at how many places you can bring your dog with you for your errands. So you've got your big box stores, and the pretty obvious ones are PetSmart and Petco that you can bring your dog to. But you can also take them to Lowe's and Home Depot, Bass Pro Shops. I think there's quite a few of the big brand names that allow dogs in their stores. But also, if you live in an area with a lot of small businesses, a lot of them might be open to having dogs come as well. So it never hurts to ask. Just always, when you are getting ready to run a bunch of errands for the day, check and see which ones you can bring your dog with you and do all of those in one go before going out and doing the ones that you can't take your dog with you. Get them exposed to new people, new smells, new experiences. And it's a really great tool and an opportunity to work on a lot of the training that you've been doing with them over the weeks, months, or even years. So in order to take your dog shopping with you, you have to be able to take your dog on car rides. Pretty straightforward, but you would be surprised at how many dogs actually don't enjoy going for car rides. And the main reason for that in most dogs is that we tend to only take our dogs to certain things. And the majority of the time, if you're only taking your dog to a couple of things regularly, those tend to be negative experiences. So things like the vet or the groomers, most dogs don't like either of those. And if those are the only places you're taking your dog to regularly, of course they're going to have anxiety about the car. Now, dogs have anxiety about their cars for a bunch of other reasons. I have one dog, he's beautiful, lovey-dovey, brain-damaged border collie who thinks that every single car we drive past is a big, giant, dumb metal sheep that he needs to bark at and try and get back into line. And it's just really stressful for him to go through all of that because he thinks that he's doing his job, but he can't do his job. It's so frustrating, and he works himself up. Now, unless you have a herding dog, that's likely not your problem. There might be other issues at play. Maybe they don't like the noise or the lights, or maybe it's just the feeling of the vibration of the car that's setting them off. There's a whole bunch of different reasons, but you need to make sure that your dog is happy and comfortable in the car. So if you've got a puppy that hasn't developed any of these issues, or an older dog that doesn't seem to have any anxiety about the car, make sure you're reinforcing that love of the car as much as you can. So when you're going to run your errands and you're taking your dog with you, that's a great time to practice being in the car. Or even if you just have to run to the bank, or you want to get Dunkin' Donuts on your drive. If you can go through a drive-through, which is what unfortunately most of our stuff is right now during this pandemic, you can get your dog really great exposure, because at least around here, our banks give out cookies. Dunkin' Donuts will give out munchkins sometimes, depending on where you go. So there's always an opportunity for them to get positive reinforcement during those rides. Now, if you do have a dog who's already anxious about the car, don't assume that just going for more and more car rides is going to fix it. You're actually going to make things worse. So you want to take a bunch of steps back and start at the beginning. Work with your dog just right outside the car. If they're comfortable standing next to the car, put them in the car. If they're comfortable sitting in the car, turn the car on. Once they're comfortable with that, back to the end of the driveway. Once they're comfortable with that, then you go for a drive, and you make that drive progressively longer and longer and longer. You never want to just dive right in. You're just going to make your problems worse. Unless you absolutely have to, like you need to go to the vet or something, in which case, do your best to distract your dog with a toy or a treat, especially anything that's more long-lasting. So things like a frozen Kong or a licky mat, snuffle mat, antler, whatever works best for your dog. So the next thing is to practice sitting politely. Now, this one is something that I have always introduced very early on in even my puppy class, because it just takes a lot of pressure off of you as the owner. So ideally, you want your dog to sit politely whenever they see another person. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Now, with puppies, you tend to see that they jump up on people and all of that. And it's really cute when they're about yay big, but when they get up to being 60, 70, 80 pounds, it's actually incredibly dangerous for them to be jumping on people. So as early as you can, get them into the habit of sitting when someone approaches them or when you approach someone else. So the way that this works is just a lot of repetition. It works really well right now when you're in the home. Whenever you have somebody walking into a room that the dog is in, have them put that dog into a sit as soon as they see them. That way they start getting in the habit of like, oh, someone I want to say hello to. I need to sit nicely to get attention. Practicing 4 on the floor gets you more. That's making sure that all 4 feet are on the floor before you give any attention to a dog, and making sure that they're sitting when they do that once they get comfortable with that whole situation. You also want to make sure that they're sitting in general for anything that they want, because if you have a dog who sits for a treat or for a walk or for their food, they're more likely to sit automatically whenever they see something that they want, like a person. So this makes it so that when you're out for your walk and you run into everybody in the neighborhood, because nobody has anything better to do than walk right now, you can go ahead and be comfortable having a conversation at a socially distanced 6 feet from your neighbor, knowing that your dog is sitting politely by your side and you don't have to worry about them getting into any trouble while you're having that conversation. It takes your mind off of things, and it also makes it so that everybody's really kind of jealous of your dog because you're able to have those conversations and those interactions without distraction. So if you have any questions at any point during all this, just put them down in the chat. I'd be happy to answer them. I'm just going to keep going through. So sitting politely leads into sit and down stays. So this is one thing, when I was teaching group obedience classes in person, people would always get kind of annoyed by stay because it's hard to teach and there was no perceived reason for them to teach it. But I'm here to tell you that it is one of the most important tools that you really should teach your dog, not just from a safety standpoint. It's really good for you to have a nice solid stay for safety reasons. So you never know in a case of an emergency when you might need to just drop your leash and trust that your dog is going to stay put. But it's also really good for behavior issues, especially right now where we're all working at home. So I don't know about you, but almost all of my clients have had some moment where they've been in a Zoom call or on a phone call, or their kids have been trying to do their homework, whatever it might be, and the dogs are pestering you for attention because you're home, you should be paying attention to me. And most dogs do that by barking, which is something you really can't hide on a Zoom call. Sometimes my dog, the one who's laying behind me, oh, you can kind of see her. There she is. Her way of getting attention is to nuzzle you, which is annoying in its own way, but it isn't as obnoxious as a bark, and it's a lot easier to hide on a Zoom call than the barking in the background is. So one thing I really encourage people to do is to get your dogs in the habit of going to a specific place, like her dog bed, and hanging out in a sit stay or a down stay. So Wish put herself into this down stay because we've been practicing so much over the 8 years that I've owned her, that if I'm doing something important, if I'm at my computer, if I'm on the phone, she knows that she needs to go out of the way and stay out of the way until I release her to come and enjoy life with me again, which I will. As soon as this live stream is done, I'll release her, tell her she's a great girl, and we'll play for a little bit. This way, it gets them into that. The more you practice that, the better they are and the more natural they are going to do that. You won't even have to think about it. But all it takes is whenever you go to sit down at your computer, sending them to their spot and telling them to lie down and stay. Now, if you don't have a good down, if you don't have a good go to your bed, and you don't have a good stay, those are all things you need to work on in order to get this behavior a little bit better installed. If you're running into trouble with teaching any of that, we do have some online courses going on right now. We do have an online puppy class, which will teach you the majority, like what you need to know for this, as well as we do offer an online training membership to our training portfolio, which is an online library of all of our training materials that gets updated weekly. So if you need help with any of that, those are two great options. You can find them both at our website, magicofpaws.com. I will try to remember to link them down in the description as well. So continuing on the idea of using down stays and sit stays is to use them when we return back to the real world to make them a part of your school routine. So if you go and you pick up your kids or drop them off at school at any point throughout the week, take your dog with you. If you have a really strong sit or down stay, your dog will be able to sit in the car or next to the car while you're getting your kids all assembled or disassembled and packed in or out of the car. It means that they're going to have that extra bit of time with the whole family, and it's also going to improve their thinking about the car as well as going on adventures. So if you get them a part of that routine, you will be able to get them exposed to a ton of different distractions. You can even use that time to work on some of your basic obedience or a new trick that you're teaching your dog. And then you can also make sure that you don't have to worry about your dog because their sit stay and their down stay is just so perfect, you don't even have to think about it. The next one is to use a recall command in your house. So recall is just come. Whenever you call your dog to you, that's a recall. So there's a whole bunch of different ways you can use this. In the more behavior functional way is when you see something in your driveway, or your dog more often sees something in your driveway or your front yard that you don't want them reacting to. So that's people like your delivery people. So Amazon truck, UPS, FedEx, Postal Service, or if you're ordering food delivery, any of that. If you have a dog that tends to be more of a watchdog, you want to make sure that as soon as you see that, you're calling them to you and preferably putting them into a sit stay or down stay for the entirety of the time that intruder is near the house. You can also use this time as a great time to just practice your come, practice that recall so that when you do go back out and re-enter the real world, you will have a much more reliable come to use with your dog. And one of the best ways to do this is on one of those rainy days where you don't feel like taking your dog for a nice long walk, to go ahead and play hide and seek. So what you do is everybody in the family goes to different rooms, preferably on different floors of the house, and you each take turns calling the dog to you. So your dog has to run from room to room, tires them out physically as well as mentally, because they're working that little brain of theirs as best they can. Then you just want to make sure that you're switching things up so that you don't always go mom, dad, kid. You have to mix it up, because if that's the order you're constantly doing, the dog will know, oh, I'm here with mom, so I better go to dad now, and they'll just preemptively do that to try and get treats. So you always want to make sure that you only ever give them treats if they came to you when you called them. If they came to you when you didn't call, no treats during this game. You can level up the difficulty by having everybody change rooms between calls, and you can even try to play this without another person if you do live at home, but you're going to want to go ahead and put your dog into a wait in one room, go to another room, and call them to you. Notice I said wait and not a stay. A wait is a temporary command, which is your dog can be called out of. It's not as permanent, it's not as lasting as a stay, it's not as immediate and urgent as a stay. It's one of those commands like you tell your dog to wait at the top of the stairs while you go down the stairs carrying the laundry so that you don't trip over them. If your dog does come down the stairs while you're carrying her laundry, it's, we're all kind of used to that at this point. It's not the safest thing, but it also isn't super dangerous. Whereas a stay is where when you use it out in the real world, is you're putting them in a controlled position so that they don't get into anything that might hurt them. So that's like when you are going to pick your kids up at the parking lot of your school, or if you're in a store and you want your dog to make sure that they aren't going anywhere. They're two very different commands, similar in many ways, but they are definitely different. And you only ever want to call your dog out of a wait. Makes it seem a lot more important than when they are in a stay versus a wait. Practicing all of this in the house gets your dog a lot of repetition, gets them used to it, and you ideally should get to the point where your dog hears their name and instantly runs to you. Just perfect. You shouldn't even have to say the word come. You should just be able to say their name, super excited, and they should run to you. Now, one of the important things about this is that you should never, ever, ever, ever call your dog for anything negative. So never call them to punish them, never call them to put them in a bath or trim their nails or anything they don't like. Now, the caveat to that is you can call them away from something that they shouldn't have, or you can call them to you to go in a bath, but you need to do something fun immediately after they come. So if you call them to come, they get a treat, they get a ton of treats, or they get some playtime or some pets and a lot of praising. Whatever it is, it has to be immediately positive after you call them to you. The reason for this is that dogs are super linear thinkers. So if you are doing, if something happens A, B, C, they don't see the connection between A and C. so A causes B and B causes C, and there's no relation between A and C in their minds. They're very linear thinkers. So you can use that to your advantage. If you do need to call your dog to go into the tub for a bath, you just call them, give them a treat, play with them, and then put them in the tub. That way they are associating something negative, the tub, with something positive, like playtime and treats. So, last thing, I promise we've gone over a lot in this live, is to make sure that you're using everything your dog knows so that they get nothing for free. So what this means is taking all the commands that you've learned at one point or another, either through a class or videos here on YouTube or whatever it might be, and you're using them to get your dog to work for what it is that they want, whether it's their dinner, a walk, playtime, whatever it might be. So like in our case, you might want to have your dog sit before you go for a walk. Maybe they lie down before you put their food down so they don't rush to the bowl. Or maybe you make them give you a high five before you throw the tennis ball. There's so many options, but you really do want to make sure that you are practicing constantly with your dog. Even if you aced puppy class 2 years ago, I guarantee you that if you tried to do some of the commands that you don't use on a regular basis, your dog is going to be confused, even if they had them down perfectly, even just a couple of weeks ago. It's kind of like the example I use with people is that if you've graduated high school and you passed all of your classes in high school, you passed algebra. Can you, if I were to ask you, factor a quadratic equation for me right now without looking it up? I'm willing to bet that the majority of people watching this would say no, that they would need to look up how to factor a quadratic equation before they could go ahead and even try. And that's the same thing for dogs. If we teach them a command and then never touch it again for weeks, when we do circle back to it, it's going to be almost like we're reteaching it. It's not because they're dumb. It's not because they're stubborn. It's because we aren't practicing with them. So any command that your dog has learned should be practiced at some point throughout the week, if not daily, depending on the type of dog that you have and depending on their personality. This is a little bit hard for some people to do. I totally get that, but that's where this whole nothing is for free comes in. So that there's plenty of opportunities where your dog is asking for something. They're asking to go out, they're asking for dinner, they're asking for your attention, whatever it might be. If you get them in the habit of doing something to earn what it is that they want, you're going to be able to, one, get them better manners. They're going to be less likely to bark at you and be obnoxious. But two, it's also a really great opportunity for them to practice all of these things they might not do on a regular basis. So this isn't necessarily for things like sit. Sit is, if you're using a sit for any of these things, it's more out of a sense of control and to make your life easier. When you're talking about doing commands to earn things that they want, these are more the things you don't practice all the time, that you don't say throughout the day. So get creative. Write down everything that you've ever taught your dog and see how many times you ask them to do a certain behavior throughout a week. And look at those commands that are 0 or maybe once or twice a week and try and get those into the repetition. Get some repetitions in and get that in the rotation of commands that you can use when they're trying to get something, when they want something. So I know we covered a lot. It's a lot of information. If you have any questions at any point, go ahead and put them down in the comments. I saw we didn't have any come in live, which is okay. I wasn't expecting any, but go ahead and put them down in the comments and I will get to them. Also, feel free to check out our training opportunity, all of our training offers on our website. Like I said, we have a virtual puppy class, which is an at your own pace, just has all the materials, and it comes with a great support group over on Facebook where I do lives like this to go either go over certain topics or to just do a Q&A and feedback session for the members of the class. We also do have the training portfolio, which is that library of all of our training information. which has 2 different levels of membership. So go ahead and check that out. One of those levels does get you some one-on-one support with me, and both of those are currently on special. You can buy a lifetime membership for both of those membership levels. The other options we do have, if you do live in the great state of Maine, specifically Cumberland County, we do offer training walks and full service training where I come to your house and do all the training for you. And if you're interested in either of those programs, again, the information is on our website at magicofpaws.com/training-memberships. So go right ahead and check those out. Put your questions down in the comments. I'm happy to answer them, or you can always go ahead and just message me directly. Either way, I will be back on here at some point. My goal is to go live every day on one of my platforms at 4 p.m. Eastern. So if you don't see me here, go ahead and check our Facebook, our Twitter, our Instagram. Even I'm trying to get onto LinkedIn Live. So if you can think of a platform where we might be, go ahead and check there first if you don't see me here. All right. Have a good rest of your day, people.